Do I look happy today? I hope you can see the smile on my face, those of you who are watching on YouTube, and those of you who are listening, maybe you can hear it even in my voice. It's been an incredible couple of weeks in my life. I have a brand new grandson. His name is Win. He's the most adorable little guy ever. I am so enjoying him. And my husband and I got to travel to my parents and celebrate my dad's 90th birthday. We celebrated my mom's 90th birthday earlier. What a blessing to have two parents who have lived the life for Jesus that they have and have reached the age of 90, and to be able to honor them and celebrate them. It has been amazing. And we've been traveling, doing lots of stuff, but I am going to be turning 59 in a few days. I can hardly believe it. And turning 59, I've been doing some reflecting. And that's what this particular podcast is going to be about. I want to share with you some of my reflections. I've been thinking about what surprised me, what I do differently. Yeah, over this last 59 years of life, and particularly the 35 some years I've been doing movement work, multiplication of disciples, what would I do differently? I was asking the Lord that yesterday all day long. And what am I convinced of at age 59? And then also, what am I noticing, especially with the move back to America and a little bit of a break? I've been on a sort of semi-sabbatical. I'll be moving into more of a full sabbatical soon. So I haven't been as engaged globally. And so taking that step back and being in an American context, I've been noticing some things, and I was sort of jotting those down in my journal. And I want to share these things with you. As I mentioned before, I'm turning 59 on June 6th, and that's a big milestone. I hope I stay 59 forever, right? But I'm turning 59, and I just wanted to do something for my podcast audience, those who read my blogs, and offer a special gift to you on my birthday. So we decided to offer a 25% off of our annual membership. That's starting today when this is released on June 2nd, and it will go through the 10th. So if you are interested in that, you've been sort of thinking about joining our membership, we would love to offer that to you at 25% off. You can go to daretomultiply.com/birthday membership sale. Birthday membership sale. It's there displayed, and it will be in the show notes. So let's dive into the first question I've been asking myself, and that is, what has surprised me? In 59 years of life, 35 plus years of ministry doing disciple multiplication, what have been some of the surprises? And, I have to say that the first thing that came to my mind as I started thinking about that question is just that God would choose me, someone like me, to do his supernatural, incredible work. God just loves to choose ordinary people who happen to say, I'm available. I just am surprised that he would choose somebody like me to see movements released and the kind of fruit that we have seen through the work that we've done. It still kind of shocks me. It still surprises me. I've also been surprised that God's love is so constant and that it's not contingent on our fruit. I think when I started out in church planning and ministry, I really had a perspective of the more I do for God, the more pleased he's going to be with me, the happier he'll be with me. And, kind of in the back of my mind, there was the understanding that the more he would love me or favor me. And I still continue to be surprised by his love, his incredible, unconditional love for us that has absolutely nothing to do with how much fruit we bear for the kingdom. And I just want to say that loud and clear for those of you who are listening and are pursuing movements or are pursuing disciples that multiply. Sometimes we can kind of think in our minds that that is something that will make God more happy with us. And I just have to say, that's one of the things that has been so true in my life. In my lowest points, He loved me still. In my most unfruitful, even times when I was going backwards in sort of productivity or so called movement success, multiplication or ministry success, in those times, I felt His love so strongly. God's love is not contingent on our fruit. And I remember a time when, yeah, everything in my life was falling apart. Everything seemed to just be, yeah, at risk of, yeah, just total disaster. And I sat on a park bench and God said to me, "Is my love for you enough?" And I resoundingly answered, "Yes, Lord. It is enough. If all I have is you and your love for me, that is what gives my life meaning. Not the fruitfulness, not the ministry, not the, producing so many incredible things for His kingdom, though I love to please Him in that way. I want to do that for Him. I want to bless His Father heart by bringing many, many lost people to Him. But His love is not contingent on that. And the longer I am in this work, the more I realize that the fruit was never the point. His love for each one of us personally, His love for humanity is really the point. It's what we have to focus on. So those are some of the things that have surprised me. I've also been thinking about, what would I do differently? What would I do differently if I had it to start all over again? And of course, I would say I don't have a lot of regrets. Though maybe a few. Maybe I need to think about that more, but there are some things that I would do differently if I were to start over again. If I could be that 23-year-old going to Nepal, launching into ministry for the first time again. And the first one is that margins in our lives are not optional. I think my younger self thought they were. I thought that, I was exceptional. I could do more than the average person. I was a highly productive, high capacity leader. I had all these things in my head that margins were for other people, but that I could somehow live without them. I would do that differently. I would not just read books about margins. I would put them into my life in greater ways. It's so important to have margins in our lives to, focus, not just pack our days and pack our lives so full. My younger self didn't do this as well. My 59-year-old self is doing it more. Okay. Yeah. I have to say, it's not something I still struggle with it. Another thing that I would do differently though is say no to things more quickly. I think that, and okay, some of this is normal in your younger years. You need to experiment to figure out who you are. And I think in your early 20s, it's good to try a lot of different things. That's part of the discovery process of learning who you are and what you're gifted in. But once I kind of honed in on who I was and what my gifts were, and that was becoming pretty clear, I think it's really important to say no to good things so that we have space for God things. I don't think I did that early enough in my ministry career or life. Another thing that I would do differently more quickly is trying to fit into the mold. I think when we first went out into ministry, I was trying to be somebody that I was not. I was trying to be what people told me I should be. I would also skip more meetings that weren't productive or weren't actually where I wasn't actually contributing, but I was going to just be present because it was obligatory. I would say no to those kinds of meetings more quickly. Sometimes I wanted to be in those circles because there was status attached. I would say no to those things. I would focus more on the lost, and I would take better care of myself. There's an example that kind of comes to my mind about this. My son-in-law, his name's Brandon, is a doctor, and he knows everything that can go wrong with my new grandson because he has worked with children. He's done pediatric care. He's been on pediatric wards. He knows what could go wrong, and that makes him more cautious. And I think, I know what can go wrong in disciple making approaches. And a question I'm asking myself at 59 is, does that make me more cautious? And I think I need to be careful and make sure that I am living in a place of faith and risk at this season of my life, and not drifting into living out of what is comfortable, just because of my age. I know some of you who are listening are 59 or older. I think at our stage of life, it's really easy to think, yeah, I already know what could go wrong, so I'm not going to go there. Instead of staying in that place of risk and faith and continuing to believe God for the things that He's calling you to now. That's something, I don't know if that's something I'd do differently exactly, but it's something that I see a caution in myself there as. I'm just so incredibly grateful for the deep friendships that God has given in my life. And as I look back, I was thinking about this is something maybe I wouldn't do differently, is invest deeply in friendships. Um, and when your children are still at home and you have that time to spend with them like you never will again. I'm not sure as I look back that I treasured those times like I could have. Discipling your children is one of the most important things that you do as a parent. If you have children and you're listening, I just want to encourage you. And we've done a few podcast episodes about this. So you can look back in the previous episodes to find those. But discipling your children, spending time with your children while they live at home, it's such a short season. And this strikes me at 59. It's such a short season. It feels like forever when you're in the midst of it, but it is short and it is limited. And investing in and treasuring, enjoying those times when you have to invest in your kids' lives is so, so precious. I think I would appreciate it more, um, kind of pause and be in it more. And then I've been thinking about as well what I'm convinced of. What is it that I am really sure about at this season in my life as I turn 59 in a couple of days? And one of the things that is so at the top of the list for me is that the only way forward in disciple making, in multiplication, is listening to God and obeying what He says. You know, my thoughts are just not His thoughts. As it says in scripture, our thoughts are not the Lord's thoughts, and so often His thoughts are higher than mine, greater than mine, different from mine. And the only way forward is to listen and obey. I am still convinced that Jeremiah 29:11 is true, that He has plans for me, purposes for me, that the future is greater than I can imagine. It is, again, Philippians 1:6, that He who began a good work in me will be faithful to complete it. He has more ahead, but it's going to require me to listen and obey. And John 15:5, another verse that means so much to me, a life verse. If we abide in Him, we will bear much fruit. But we have to abide, we have to listen. And then as we hear, we have to take that risk of faith to obey. I am more convinced of that today at 59 than I ever have been before. I must pause to listen and hear Him. Our past success is something that we cannot lean on for future breakthrough. that future breakthrough, those new things that God is calling you to, the greater things He's calling you to today, only can happen. They only can come through prayer and even some new levels of suffering and pruning in our lives. So I'm asking myself this question as I turn 59 in a couple of days. Cynthia, are you still listening to God? And are you still willing to obey what He says? Can God still trust you to step out even when the things He's telling you to do don't make sense in your natural mind? These are questions I'm asking myself. I'm convinced the only way forward is to listen and obey. A second thing that has come to my mind as I think about what am I convinced of is, and I kind of referenced it just earlier, is that the greatest fruit in our lives comes out of our greatest trials. And that's not to say that God caused those suffering or trials, but we have to go through them. You know, every single breakthrough in my life and ministry has been preceded by something I never would have chosen to have happened to me. And yet I can see these patterns at 59 of, a downturn, a crisis, a difficult season, and then greater fruit. And then another difficult season, and then greater fruit. I think back to Nepal, where twice I was evacuated, medically evacuated on a stretcher, flown out of there. And that suffering became the soil for the seeds that released new work into unreached people groups, new teams that were launched. There is a clear connection between what I went through and what God then did through me and my husband in our lives. Then there was the season in India where we were forced to move to India. We lost our visa. Somebody, I was telling our life group, what does it mean to lose your visa? So it wasn't like it was something that we physically lost, right? I realized I was using missionary speak there. Anyone who has worked overseas knows what it means to lose a visa, but it's not like I lost something physically. It was that our visa didn't come through. Our permission to stay in Nepal, we were pursuing a type of visa and permission, and it just didn't come. And suddenly we had to move. And we moved, we were forced to move to India. I was just telling this story to our life group here in Minnesota. And yeah, out of that horrifically difficult move, leaving the land we loved, leaving the place our children had been born, feeling like God didn't answer our prayers to release the visa and being confused. But out of that, God gave us a heart for more. He expanded our ministry. And I ended up being asked to lead over 100 church planning teams and working all across South Asia in places I had never had a vision for when we were just in Nepal. God expanded what we were doing through that difficulty, through that trial. And then there was the time when, while we were in India, a very close colleague of mine, her name was Denziki, she was killed. She was in an auto rickshaw that was hit by an army truck, and it was a sudden loss. Again, a major downturn. I felt like I couldn't do anything anymore. I felt like God wasn't there, that He wasn't answering prayers. It was a crisis. But out of that crisis of faith came this upturn. And what did we begin to see? We began to see through that situation of grief and taking in a child into our home during that season, there was this new release of fruit that came in our slum ministry work and the work that we were doing. And we expanded into new things and new ways of working that we had never anticipated. That loss became like a doorway into a new ministry. And then there was a season at the end of our time in India where our marriage was in crisis. Again, we've talked about this some on some of the earlier episodes, but Todd and I were really struggling. We were just missing each other, not communicating well at all. And it was like one of the deepest personal valleys I've been through. In the midst of that, I was struggling with depression. But out of that transition, out of that challenge and valley, we made decisions. We moved to Thailand where there was better member care and counseling that we could go through. We moved to Thailand where we could have better medical care as well. And out of that change that came, we then God expanded our ministry to be global, not just South Asia focused. And we were able to hand off our work there to really capable leaders that we'd raised up during our season in India. And again, the downturn and then the growth and the expansion. Even during COVID, we saw this incredible expansion while the whole world shut down. And we had launched the Getting Started in Disciple Making Movements, our online training. And somehow COVID, this horrible situation, catapulted that into something that is now reaching 122 nations, and thousands of people are being trained around the world. So, what's my point here with all this? What is it that I'm convinced of? It's that though I didn't choose those valleys, I can trace every single mountaintop, most fruitful time and season in my life directly back to those valleys of suffering, of trial, of challenge. And I realized when I was thinking about this yesterday that that pattern is not going to stop. And probably there are more valleys ahead of me, and there are more mountaintops. It's this cycle that God has allowed in our lives of pruning, suffering, and then new growth and advancement. And it, keeps working its way up as we become more and more fruitful people. So I've been telling myself, Cynthia, it is not time to coast, but what it is time for is to submit to God even more deeply than ever before. And then the third thing I want to mention as I've been reflecting on kind of what am I convinced of today is that Sabbath and rhythms in our lives, spiritual rhythms, are not optional. They're just not optional. Though I still have a tendency to overwork, my passion for the lost is great and I want to do more. And yes, if I'm honest, yeah, it's kind of hard to say, but to be totally honest, there's a bit of a dark side of my particular set of gifts and passion. And the desire, that shadow side that seeks to succeed and perform, it's still there in me. But I am wiser now, and I am more convinced than ever that Sabbaths, sabbaticals, retreats, having a rhythm in your life of rest and intake from God are not optional, especially if God has called you to make a significant impact on those around you and to see fruitfulness in his kingdom. And that's part of why I've planned a sabbatical. You're going to be hearing about that at the end of June. I'll be taking the month of July off, and you won't be seeing me as much in person, showing up on social media and things like that. I'll be taking a bit of a break. So you'll hear more about that. But quarterly retreats, taking a sabbatical every 7 to 10 years, for 3 to 6 months. It's absolutely critical. It's not optional for serious practitioners, pioneering pastors, those who are facing significant spiritual warfare and really advancing the kingdom. I am totally convinced of that. Well, I've been back in America, and that in itself has been a bit of one of those downturns of adjusting, transitioning, being in a new location, being not where I absolutely love to live. I loved Asia so much, and it was hard to leave. But being back in America, I've been noticing some things about the American church, and I think it's important, to name those and to share those. And I really believe God has brought me back to America to speak into the American church in some kind of unique way from the experience I've had in multiplication and movements abroad. And as I continue to work globally, I believe God is opening doors, and he already is, for me to speak into churches here in the US as well. So let me just share some of the observations. People often ask me that. I was just at a conference, Movement Leaders Collective, and somebody said, I would love to hear, what are you noticing? What do you see? One of the things is the Christian bubble. People who are believers are really very content living in a Christian bubble. Um, it's comfortable. Most of their friends are Christians. They don't know lost people very well. They may know their neighbors' names. Many people don't even know that. Um, they may have colleagues at work, but there's just no mindset of God has placed me here. I shouldn't say no mindset. I don't want to sound condemning. The vast majority of Christians in America don't see themselves as being placed there by God to reach those people. They're not intentional about it. They don't even notice that they're not intentional, right? And it's striking to me as a cross-cultural missionary who's served among frontier peoples abroad for most of my life that people will send out missionaries from their church to go reach this unreached people group in Afghanistan or Yemen and be like ready to pray for them and give money to that. But the Afghans and Yemenis who are in their city, they have zero interest in having conversations with them about the Lord. It's just such a disconnect in the church here. Another thing I notice is and this is hard to say. And again, I'm not trying to condemn. I'm just noticing, observing prayerlessness in the church in America, in the church in the West is huge. Like people pray. I'm not saying people don't pray, but they don't pray for the lost. They don't pray for their neighborhoods. They pray for themselves and their church. And that's not wrong. That's not bad. But boy, if we want to reach the lost in our nation, we have to start by praying for them and really seriously taking the responsibility to pray for people who don't know Jesus, not only in our own families, but we can certainly start there, starting with the colleagues that you have at work, starting with what we call your oikos. But prayerlessness is a problem in our lives as American Christians or Western Christians, and not seeing our responsibility to reach the lost as part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. I think we have delegated outreach to full-time workers. We've delegated the responsibility. I'll bring them to church and pastor can preach to them and they'll get saved and then they'll be discipled in my church. And there's nothing wrong with that. But boy, when we look at the needs in the West, and I read a statistic recently that was talking about how every other religion in America is growing faster than Christianity. Every other religion, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, they're growing faster than Christianity. That is a big problem. Lostness is going to increase and is increasing in our nation. And if we don't change, and intentionally, as believers, followers of Jesus, engage, and as pastors and leaders, help our people know how to engage with the lost in active ways that are more than only bringing them to church, we are in trouble. This is something that has been so striking to me. And for those of you who are listening from abroad and you're working in other countries, pray for America, pray for the West, pray for the church in the West. There are so many mature Christians in the pews who could be out there as disciple makers. This is something that is really starting to bother me and something I've been praying a lot about. God, how do we activate the priesthood of believers in these Western nations so that they can be harvesters in the harvest field because the harvest is ripe. Some of the things that I have been seeing about myself as I come back to America is that I'm not fully an American, though that is the country on my passport. But I'm also not fully an African where I was born. I'm not fully an Asian where I lived most of my life. I'm not quite at home anywhere. Everywhere I go, I feel a little bit like this isn't my place. And I've been realizing that that is actually a gift from God, that I'm able to relate to so many different kinds of people. And yet I have insights. So I've been grappling with this within myself and learning to see what I could see as a weakness or be troubled about as something that's actually a gift from God. And while I am an American in culture and I do see American tendencies in myself, the independence, the productivity worship, right? Materialism, all these things, there are parts of that in me. Um, I'm not above those things, but I am not only those things. Is that, I don't know if this is making sense or even is helpful to you. It's just some of my self reflections. Um, yeah, I'm also thinking about how, yeah, my weak areas are my strengths. This was so real to me earlier today. Just I was meditating on this, how when we are weak, we are strong. And one of my I have a tendency to look at my introverted personality as a weakness. I don't know, that's not right, but it's there in me. And I've just been realizing, yesterday was Sunday and I was tired. We had been traveling, and I decided to stay home to watch the service for our church online because I needed to have a time where it was just me and God and I didn't have to talk to people. Um, Learning in myself to accept my areas of weakness and see them as strengths. If I can, in humility, embrace them, that's something that God has been teaching me. And I think the last thing, and what I want to close with here, I don't want this episode to get too terribly long. We're already at about 30 minutes, and we're going to close in just a minute. But I wanted to share and close with something that I think kind of sums up everything that I've been reflecting on this last few days and as I get close to 59. And it's love, that everything really comes back to love. Do I love God and do I love people? I've been thinking about 1 Corinthians 13 a lot. And I thought, how would I rewrite 1 Corinthians 13 from the experienced movement leader, movement practitioner perspective, someone who has seen movements happen globally and wants to see many more? And I was thinking about this and I kind of started rewriting it as if I've launched 100 movements and seen 1 million people come to Christ, but have not love, I'm a resounding gong. And here, let me look at it. And if I have all these things, I speak in other languages and have learned lots of different languages, and I can brag about how many languages I speak. And if I have these well-tuned spiritual gifts, but have not love, I'm nothing. And if I have the faith that can move mountains, and I even wrote a book about that, my first devotional, Faith to Move Mountains, and I do have a gift of faith, but even if I have great faith and can help people dream of great things, but I have not love, I'm nothing. And if I'm generous and give everything to see the work of the ministry advance, and I'm the biggest donor in our ministry, and people give to me, but I give it right back to the kingdom, but I don't have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Am I patient? Love is kind. Am I kind? It does not envy. Do I envy others who are seeing greater fruit than me? It does not boast. Do I draw pleasure from sharing about the breakthroughs and the fruit in a way that's not of God? It is not proud. Am I proud at times, looking down on others who are not as fruitful, not as well positioned, or don't have the quote unquote right strategy? It does not dishonor others. It's not self seeking. Do I sometimes want to get those finances for the work we're doing instead of seeing them released for others? These kinds of questions are so important for us to ask. And, as I think about particularly the one about, am I patient? Am I kind? Am I full of his love? Does that radiate out of me? I fall short. And these are things I want to work on as I enter into this next year of life. When the neighbor next to me shows that they're downcast in their face, am I taking time to show the love of God? As I sit with a new grandson and parents in their 90s, who I am as a person who is loving God and loving others matters more than all the things I've done. And I am asking myself the question, am I still becoming someone that my grandchildren can emulate, can want to become like? As I close, I want to share with you a verse from Joshua 14, verse 12. In Joshua 14:12, we have Caleb, and he is 85 years old, and I'm not 85 yet, but he says he's just as strong as he ever was in battle. And he says, give me this mountain. Give me this mountain. And I want to say that to God as I enter this next year of life. There are still mountains. There are still hills he wants me to climb and valleys he wants me to walk through. But my hand is in his, and I know that he's got me. He loves me, and he loves you today. And I am his, and you are his. And I am saying to God, as I start this new year of life, I am here and I am available. And I'm asking myself those questions. Am I still listening? Am I still obeying? Am I still taking those risks of faith? My answer today is yes. I hope yours is too. I want to mention just one more time, it's my birthday week. And I meant to say that earlier. I think I said it once, but just want to remind you, 25% off our annual membership now through June 10th. Here, let me stick that link up on our, if you're watching. For those of you who are interested, our Exploring Further membership, which is you get 2 articles, it's $52 for the year. Our Diving Deeper membership, which is where you get those articles, plus you get a Diving Deeper interview where I go deeper on topics, really important topics with key people who have seen movements happen. The Diving Deeper is just going to be $74, 25% off. So if you've been thinking about that, this is your chance to go deeper and explore further the things that we have been talking about here on the podcast. So, yeah, let me just recap for you and give you an action step. 3 takeaways that I hope you'll have. God's love for you is not contingent on your fruit. It never was, and it never will be. And every valley in your life, like mine, has been soil for the next upswing, the next peak you're about to see happen. It's the up and down of serving God and movements. Don't despise the valleys. Don't worry if you're in one. And those periods and seasons of desert or fruitfulness, as you go through it with your hand in His, He's going to bring you to that next season of greater expansion through your life. The pattern doesn't stop, and you shouldn't either. And then one more thing, who you are matters more than what you've done. Love is still the most important thing. So this week, here's your action step. Ask yourself this question. Ask the same question that Caleb asked at 85 and that I'm asking today at 59. What mountain is God calling me to take? What task or vision is He putting before me, but I've been too cautious, too tired, or too comfortable to attempt to say yes to? Write that down and share it with one other person, and then take one step to move forward towards it. And I'd love if you would share it in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, drop that in the comments even right now as you're watching. I'll be reading those and praying for you. I would love to hear from you. If you're listening, drop those in your podcast app comments as well. And if you're part of our Dare to Multiply community, share about them on the community as well. God bless you guys. Keep multiplying disciples, and I will see you back next week. That's all we've got for this episode of Dare to Multiply. One thing that would really help both us and other people who might like to listen in is for you to rate and review the podcast. If you haven't done that yet on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'd also love to connect with you on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Feel free to message me with any topics, questions you'd like addressed, or guests you'd like me to interview. Until next week then, please remember, no matter how ordinary you feel, God's dreams for us are always bigger than we can imagine. Let's dare to trust Him for a greater harvest.